This podcast includes explicit content. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Ersties podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about squirting.
The Ersties podcast.
The popularity of squirting has risen massively in recent years, especially on Pornhub searches. But it's not actually a new phenomena. The Kama Sutra, written between 200 and 400 AD, speaks of female semen that falls continually from the vagina. There are also references to female ejaculation in early Chinese Taoist texts. We're going to talk about what squirting actually is it pee or isn't it, what it feels like, and some strategies and resources to help you get there. We're also interviewing the world record-holding squirter, Lola Jean.
The fact that I crushed science further proves the fact that we don't know anything about squirting.
But before we get started, I've noticed some interesting sex news on the internet recently, ladies. Have you seen the graph that's showing the differences between men and women under 30 and how much sex they're having?
What is it about?
Well, it actually shows that the number of men under 30 who aren't having sex has actually nearly tripled in the past decade.
That's not surprising. Actually, I've met some of them. The ones that I've encountered is people that are deciding kind of like self-chosen celibacy. And I felt that a lot of it had to do with the pressure they were feeling from women to have children and their like reactiveness to not do that. And then just like withdrawing from the market kind of because of that reason. Isn't that weird?
I'm questioning, it's because women want to have children, so they withdraw?
That's what that's what I've been encountering.
Is that what they say, or do you think there's something else behind there?
What would it be?
I don't know. Like, I feel like we have contraception now. Like, like we have the pill. Half the women don't want to have. Like, I don't know. I know a lot of women that don't want to have babies so young. So.
Well, I really hope it's just because women know better now. Like, honestly. And then they just like don't buy like that much bullshit about like going to bed with whoever, whatever. Is it only about the guys? Isn't because like women are also making their own choices, you know what I mean? It's not just like, oh, like men like decided on their own having the sex, you know? It can be also about women like taking less shit than before.
All right. So women saying no and women like having higher standards.
Becoming a lesbian.
By choice, isn't it? But was there anything about women statistics on there? Are we rising? Are we having sex more? Makes sense if we're turning lesbian.
So the chart says it's the shares of men and women between the ages of 18 and 30 reporting no sex in the past 30 years. 28% of men, 18% of women, 2018.
Okay.
Right, so let's get back into the squirting. As I mentioned, the popularity of squirting searches on Pornhub have increased a ton in recent years. But did you know that women are actually 44% more likely to search for squirting videos compared to men?
That's true. I've been Googling squirting all month this month.
It doesn't come as a surprise, like this sort of like function that every single person with a vagina is capable of performing. And then like at the same time being like a mystery to yourself. And due to the lack of other sex education resources at hand, like you get like free porn. It's like, okay, this is the only medium in which I can get to know about this. Let's watch it.
I agree. There's so much bullshit and there's, as you say, such a lack of proper information that, yeah, of course, we're eager to know more and understand what's going on there.
So you think that lots of women are searching for it not just to get off, but to actually educate themselves and understand what it is?
The first squirting experience I ever had was watching American Pie, like one of the sequels. Do you remember that?
No.
Oh, there's this like really super beautiful girl and she's like always giving this guy head and the guy really wants to reciprocate this back to her, but she's not letting him do it. Then finally right at the end, she like squirts, but obviously it's American Pie, so it's super exaggerated. And I was like 16, I was like, oh my God, can my vagina do that?
Talking about the unrealistic squirting in American Pie, and also, do you find that squirting in porn can sometimes be a little bit unrealistic?
Yeah, but I don't see that's an issue. I mean, like if we're talking about porn, in so many cases we're talking about fantasies, and like also it's about like if it's like about a fantasy in terms of like sexual performance of like a woman having like endless libido and like being naturally submissive, about like dudes with like massive cocks, solid as rock and so on. Like okay, like squirting or like gushing and like having like this fountain out of your pussy, it's part of the fantasy. So well,
Right, the same way that sperm also often in porn gets faked, right? Just as a mixture of whatever. So it's just, yeah, fair enough. We fake sperm, we fake
So
squirt.
squirting is sometimes somewhat faked in porn.
I mean, squirt is performance. Whether it's actual squirting or whether it's fake, it's irrelevant from a viewer perspective, I'll say. And also, like, performers do what they have to do to deliver that, so.
And it's a hard preparation you need for doing a squirting scene, right?
Yeah, there's this article on Jezebel by this journalist Tracy Clark Forey, in which she cites a lot of like people from the industry, and this very prominent performer Adriana Chechik, like she literally quotes her as saying, "It's harder to prepare for squirting than for anal."
I think I wonder like so you take, there's quite a few women out there that have like actually experienced orgasm, but they're not sure if they have. And maybe if they're watching lots of scenes with really loud screaming and things like this, they're expecting it to be like that. And then it's not. And they think, oh, that's not an orgasm. And I wonder if the same thing happens a bit with squirting. Maybe for some individuals, it's more of a gushing, like type, a bit of liquid. And then you watch it in porn and it's a triumphant fountain, like flying into the air.
I think there's a fundamental problem, at least in my opinion. There is a fundamental problem in which we talk about like female ejaculation only as squirting, because it manifests in different ways, not only as like squirting as in the like the way we see it in porn. There's this survey conducted by Dr. Shana Pankranova, which we had in our previous episodes, and also Kenneth Play, a sex educator specialized in squirting. And it was like the survey, it's really worth taking. It's really long, but it like really struck my attention that in one of the questions they ask, when you squirt, how does it come out? And then they have a massive list in which the ejaculate manifests. It's like squirting, gushing, trickling, raining, streaming, flowing, leaking, pouring, dripping, or other. In my personal experience, like I never like squirted literally. I leak or I flow, but I've never just like that's not my case. I've seen other people do that naturally, but for me, I leak or flow. I don't squirt.
Feels like all the different words for snow. I think that's why it's so important to have diversity in porn. So you can have as you're saying, Lina, the performative, crazy, superhero squirting stuff, right? But also we just need maybe other things that show more realistic and like everyday kind of squirting. As in, for example, Erstis, there is the squirting workshop made by Lindsay Cruz. And I think that's quite an accurate or like experimentation with it, because there's Lindsay teaching 3 other women to squirt, and they're just like exploring it as they go and learning from it.
Like less spectacular, more normalizing, still looking good, all of them, still having fun.
And exciting at the same time. Like you're going with them and figuring out like what's going to happen. Is it going to happen?
They're all different levels. I don't want to ruin the ending.
So to watch the squirting workshop video by Lindsay, you can go to erstis.com/podcast, where you can also claim your 50% discount on Erstis.
So how about you ladies? Are you a gusher or a licker or a flower or a...
Wait, I need some clarification here. So what's gushing mean?
I feel like that's more what I do. It's just like a flood sort of thing, but I can't get any like...
As like peeing, but without like...
What's it like what's the word I'm looking for? Traction, there's no trajectory of flight, you know? Which is what I would like. I would like that, to be honest, but it's still cool, Like
powerful, but without the fountain effect,
I think for me, it feels more like a balloon that just breaks and it's like... Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's
how I've experienced it so far.
Yeah. I think that's kind of like a gush kind of...
That's gush? Okay.
That's what I would say.
A gush. I don't know. I'm a trickler, I think. I'm like, when I'm done, I look at the bed. I'm like, oh, you're there. Not like a little bit, yeah, like little puddles, but I don't know. And then like my partner tasted it. Was like, it tastes very sweet.
And what does it feel like?
I think for me it's different. So I often feel like something's pouring out, and I feel like I'm emptying something, but actually it does not manifest in a lot of liquid coming out. And when the liquid does come out, and I see like the puddle on the bed, I don't necessarily notice so much. So I don't know if there's like a dissociation from my body, or if like maybe this feeling of release, it's like less and it just feels like that. But then when this a lot amount of like liquid comes out, it just happens.
I completely relate to that. There's something that happens at that point where it's kind of a loss of control moment, and it's almost like I'm in another place and I can kind of hear the sounds of the liquid coming out, but I've moved away. But it's not like, I don't think it is like a dissociation. I think it's almost more like subspace or something like that for me, where I just feel like I've entered another.
Right. Totally agree. I think for me, the very first time that I squirted that way was I was super stoned. Yeah. And someone was fisting me. So I did have this feeling of completely losing control in a good way of my muscles there, and just like surrendering. And then that happened.
Yeah, in my experience, it happens when I don't put my mind to it, it manifests. When I say like, okay, it's 6 o'clock, it's time for my squirting training. And then it's like myself, like lube, like hand glove, like squatting, like everything, like all the equipment. And it's like, I just pee. And I just like I just pee and then just like try to push too hard that I just like end up peeing. And then it's like, okay, no, I need to change my methods. And then when I just like never think about it, then it's like, it happened.
And are you happy about it happening? Or does it, I know for some women it can feel a bit embarrassing.
I heard first about squirting before it happened to me. And I heard it from a really cool porn performer that actually, made us a show of that. And I was so fascinated. I was like, okay, I want to do that. So it was always like, I want to achieve this. This is something that I want to do. So when it happened, I was like, yes, I felt more proud. I'm like, score than shame, definitely.
I was talking to some other girlfriends, and then I was like, oh, like, have you ever like ejaculated? And they were like, oh my God, no, I hope that never happens to me. And I was like, oh, okay then, have you? And I was like, yeah. Yeah, I have. She was like, oh. And she was really getting really stressed out about it. I was like, why are you scared? She's like, yeah, I don't want to pee on people. I was like, it's not pee.
I think this is where a lot of the discomfort and controversy around squirting arises, because, I mean, even if you just Google squirting, the first thing that comes up are articles being like, finally, proof squirting is actually pee. The problem with this is there's actually not very many studies on female ejaculation, full stop. So we don't really have a lot of research to go off. One of the studies that was done involved taking a scan of people's bladders sort of before and after squirting, and also after peeing, to sort of compare. And they found that after squirting, their bladders were actually emptied. So then that's something that people have now taken as being like, it's proof, it's pee.
But wasn't it like, so first they peed, they took a sample of that, then they, made themselves squirt, they took a scan just before squirting, after squirting. So yeah, the bladder did fill up, then did empty. Yeah. But then they checked the liquid, and they did find pee, and also different things created from the prostate,
definitely.
Right?
Yeah, it was a mixture of the two.
Current research, etc. Like some people are like prepared to acknowledge that there's like some like pee, quote unquote. But I think also if we reduce it to pee, we just like thinking about like this like physiological need of like going to like release just like pee, etc. But it makes a lot of sense that if like the prostatic glands are covering the urethra, I mean, like if they're like just next to each other, like it makes sense that it's somehow like mixed with liquid that resembles pee. At the same time, like you have like very special holes for squirting, which are like located right next to the urethra. Your squirt holes are just like next to the urethra. So if it's mixed, it's still like something very distinct, I read like this book by this Spanish author. Her name is Diana Torres, Porno Terrorista. It's like very written like from this like very like independent effort of her to like go through all the academic literature in squirting and the history of like how squirting is studied, etc. And she also, because she's like a very prolific squirter, she does this experiment in which she says, if you want to tell whether you peed or you're squirted, one day that you know you're going to have sex and so on, eat lots of beetroot. You know, when you eat a lot of beetroot, when you pee, it comes out pink or reddish.
Ooh.
Eat a lot of beetroot on that day. Have sex, whatever. If you pee, you pee. If you squirt, squirt. But then you'll get to know, because if it's pee, it's going to be pink. If it's like actual ejaculate or if it's squirting, it's not going to be pink.
That's some homework right there.
Yeah. So if your bed covers are ruined, you know why. You know it was pee.
Is it my period or is it pee?
But maybe the whole thing is it doesn't really matter. That's it. The whole problem about it being pee is because we have a problem with pee, but pee shouldn't be a problem.
Not really. Why do you think it does matter to people?
I have to admit, when I first had that question, which was actually part of the survey from Jana Frangalova, was like, would it matter to you if it's pee? And first I was like, yes, it would. But then I realized, wait, no, this is absurd. For me personally, it was a mixture between me just wanting to hold onto this as a like woman liberation, empowerment, somehow issue, which still can be it being whatever it is.
Yeah, I can understand why that comes up, because when people are saying no, it's pee, it is almost like it doesn't count. It's not real. Like it's not a real thing. It's an undermining.
It's
thing.
dismissing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can understand why you would go against that. And then you change.
I changed my mindset, as we do, and as we all should go and grow and learn and change our mindsets. Who cares?
Even like these days, there are like some like scientific studies in which they even talk about like the relevance of the female prostate at all. And I think that also that has marked like the way in which like this phenomenon has been studied. I don't know, but I bet whatever you want to compare, like if we had to like put like the bulk of like studies on erectile dysfunction next to the amount of studies and then the funding for ejaculation for cunts, like how much the difference will it be? I'll bet you whatever that it will be like 500 times more.
Outrageous. And also, but just like the way the studies are formulated, as you're saying, like, is this real? What is this all about? Is it even relevant? And there's no voices of women actually being acknowledged. I mean, like, wait, this is what happens with my body. I'm actually connected and this I can tell you. And that's not being like heard. Right?
That's actually what Lola Jean makes such a big point of, and being the reason that she wanted to break the world record on this thing, to draw attention to it as something that is an important thing. And she actually broke the world record for volume and squirted a much bigger volume than the scientist had said was even possible. So just kind of broke science. And she also makes the point that, you know, we can have these ideas about is it pee or is it not pee, and science about that's sort of flaky science. But what about our actual experience of this thing? Everyone's like, it doesn't taste like it. It doesn't smell like it. Maybe we should be considering that instead. Yeah, lots of interesting things Lola Jean had to say. So let's get straight to her interview to learn some more.
I'm Lola Jean, and I am a sex educator, a mental health professional, an occasional pro-dom, a fetish wrestler, a writer, and the world record holder for volumes squirted in a 1-minute period.
Okay, we're going to get back to that world record in just a second. I'd like to start off talking a little bit more about your workshops, because you hold so many of them. I wondered if you could tell me a bit more what they're about.
I love doing in-person workshops. I think that when you actually do something, it really makes the education sink deeper. You're able to get that real-time feedback. That being said, it's a big barrier to entry, and it's asking a lot of someone to come to a class and like participate or admit to the other people in the class that you're all in there for the same thing, whatever that may be. When I started doing squirting workshops, which was one of the first ones that I've done on my own, it was because I was teaching with my mentor and I didn't feel like I was represented as the one who was squirting. And I love my mentor dearly, but it's also that we're all teaching different things for different reasons. His workshops are more focused on couples and for people, you know, making someone else squirt, a woman or the vulva owner being the passive recipient, and like, here's how you do something to them. I think it's, if we're going to like learn these things, it's also, let's break down, why do we want to squirt? Why do we want to learn these things? What are the benefits of it? You know, and in the grand scheme of things, if you want to do something for someone else or for yourself, like, why do you want to do that? Is it because you want to check off the box? Is it because, you know, like if your body can experience something, you want to do that? It's really about that process and building on it. Like, what do you think you know about this? Why do we act the way we act? I really like taking a psychological approach instead of it just being like, learn the skills, do the thing. There's so much beyond that.
So what made you first want to be an educator?
I didn't set out to do this. You know, I tried the traditional route of working in a certain respect. I wanted to work in advertising because I liked the fact that words and images could influence the way people behave. You know, I'm fascinated by sex. I always have been. And I thought like, oh, I could do marketing or advertising within sex. Emotional relationships weren't available to me. So I chose to explore sexual ones. And that became a language I knew how to communicate in, a medium I knew how to communicate in. It was actually right after I discovered like, oh, my body can squirt, which was also right after I met this person who's like, oh, they want to explore the same sexual and kink things that I do. And they respect me at the same time. Mind blown. And it ended immediately after we had sex. And I was kind of left with like the same kind of thing of like, well, I want to explore these things, but I'm not in a relationship. And it was kind of like, fuck it. I'm going to figure out ways of protecting myself and able to explore these different things that I want to do. And I had all these unique things of knowing how to do from experience of having so many lovers, being really curious and asking people about different things, and also just be willing to like say, what's next? And try different things and try it twice. It's great because sex is endlessly interesting. People are endlessly interesting, and both of those are going to constantly be changing. There will never be something I can't learn. There's always going to be more to learn.
Let's get onto this world record business. So World Record Squirter, is that the official title? Okay, what does that mean?
I like you could be, so it's for volume, not distance. So I hold the world record for volume.
Okay.
And it's of self-squirting. So using only the assistance of one's person, which I think the record for distance was with the assistance of another human or a toy or something like that. But so the reasoning for setting the record too is like, it's kind of a like social political statement, both of the fact that I don't need another human to do this thing that we view as a male ego thing. And also I can do it solely by myself. And the fact that I had always, so the science says that the max a woman can squirt is around 900 milliliters. And I was always kind of jokingly, I think I can beat that though. And the fact that I crushed science further proves the fact that we don't know anything about squirting. I felt like I could disprove science in 5 seconds, where I can make myself squirt in 3 seconds. It's not that hard. And that blows people's mind. It blows researchers' mind. It proves too that it's not an orgasm, clearly not. And just the level of control I have on it. It's not the solely knee-jerk reaction thing that like, here's how you make someone squirt. It's like, I just squirted myself.
So what was the volume?
So I squirted 1,250 milliliters in about 25 seconds.
Let it be known, science. So you mentioned your first experience of squirting earlier. How did that come as a shock to you at the time? How did you feel about it the first time? Did you know what it was?
I am not sure, but actually when I was like 22, I think I may have had an experience squirting while I had sex. What my familiarity with squirting was like friends like showing around this like porn video, be like, oh, she's a gusher, gross, blah, blah, blah. And I really didn't understand what that was. And the first time I realized it, when that was like, you know, maybe 5 years later or something, I was with a lover and he was going down on me. And again, I didn't know it happened. And he told me, he's like, oh, you squirted. Do you do that? And I was like, I guess.
I'm a squirter now.
So that happened. He took note of it. And then the next time we were together, just like let it loose. And like he said that and he was kind of excited about it. And I didn't really realize it until like the bed was completely destroyed after that. And then he was like, congratulations, you're a squirter. But it was surprising. And after that, that's where I really honed in on the skill, because I was like, I was just made aware this crazy, really crazy thing that my body does that I didn't know it could do. So after that, I was just like, okay, I want to figure out what this thing is. I don't have another person to do this with right now. So I locked myself in my room and I masturbated until I figured it out. I was able to replicate the sensation. And then after that, it was kind of a period of trial and error and practice of, I wonder if I can make myself squirt if I do this. I wonder if I can change the amount and volume I squirt in with a partner as opposed to with me, of how these muscle groups change. And I really just nerded out over my own body. And I just used it. I hacked my body at an athletic level of understanding different muscle groups and different ways to do that. And I didn't stop really being curious. There's been a couple times where I've been able to use my muscles and squirt without touching myself. Like the more aroused I am, the easier it is, or the more it will be, type of a thing too. But also when you're aroused, your vulva increases in size, like a lot of things there change. So that makes sense as well. But it's really something where when I touch myself, it's like, or when I'm squirting and I touch myself, like it's just kind of the cherry on top that I need to make it happen. But everything else is happening internally. And the more research and the more I know about pegging and prostate play and things like that, the more I'm like, they're exactly the same thing, just done. I mean, genitals come from the same part of the embryo. They're super similar. So it makes perfect sense.
I actually think that there's going to be a major game changer when they start exploring squirting on people with penises. Because last Porn Film Festival, I saw this film by Kate Sinclair, starring guy with a penis, fuck machine, and like really like stimulates his prostatine for a very long and intense time. And then this liquid comes out that is not semen, it's way more liquid, looks more like pee or squirts. And actually, when I saw it, everything started to make sense. This is not female ejaculation, quote unquote. This is just some kind of ejaculation that can be produced from bodies. And these skin glands from people with vagina are similar to the prostate, isn't it?
Yeah, to a tissue level and to cells level, like the prostate for people with penises, it's pretty much the same. And it makes all the sense in the world because as females, quote unquote, like people who can give birth, you cannot give birth to another being that doesn't have like your tissue nature, you know? You cannot give birth to something that doesn't have like anything in common with you.
Right. I think a lot more of guys are actually squirting without acknowledging it. Like it happened to me once that I was like giving head to this guy and I thought he peed in my mouth. I was like, the fuck? It's going, and he was super like ashamed and surprised and didn't know what happened. And, you know, looking back at it, I'm like, okay, that wasn't, or like whatever it was, that was squirting.
Is this a similar concept of pre-cum or is this going to be like a different thing?
I think it's a different thing. No, it's a lot of liquids. Yeah. Okay. It's like squirting. I would say that's the most similar thing that I could compare it to.
In this process of learning, you, like you said, you sort of locked onto like, wait, what is that feeling that happens when I squirt? Like, can you describe that in a little bit more detail?
Actually, I was on another podcast recently, and I like the way she described it as like the feeling of when you're at the top of a roller coaster. That's not when you're squirting. That's right before you squirt. People say, oh, it feels like you're going to pee. It doesn't feel like you're going to pee.
No.
It's like a tickle. It's like this, either it's like before the tickle, like right before you scratch it kind of a thing, or it's like right at the top of the roller coaster before you go down. It feels like a release. So when I did the world record and I squirted that much, everyone's like, are you okay? Like you must be exhausted or whatever it is. And I'm like, I feel great. Like, I feel like that needed to happen. I feel so much better than I did before. Like, I feel like it just like needed to come out of me so much. It does feel like a release. It feels different. It's definitely different than an orgasm. Once you learn how to do it, squirting is a lot easier to achieve than an orgasm. And it's something I clung to because of that, because I know I can squirt a lot easier than I can orgasm. And it's something that's like more or less guaranteed in any sexual experience for me. Whereas with orgasm, you know, it's going to be dependent on the partner, how I'm feeling that day, lots of different things in that sense. But squirting is something I know that can happen, that we can both enjoy, that, you know, they feel like their ego stroked a little bit, that I was able to enjoy myself and they were able to physically see it. But the feeling of it, I describe it as a feeling of a loss of control. Yeah. But that could also really be due to the fact that my kinks are largely focused around control, either taking it, retaining it, giving it up. Everything for me is focused around control. So it could be that's why I associate it with that. But it really, it does just feel like a release. Mm-hmm. That's the better way I can put it. But beforehand, it's that feeling where you're like, I don't know what my body's going to do. It's feeling like it's going to do something that I'm going to have zero control over, which can be scary if you haven't done it, because you're like, am I going to pee? Am I going to poop? Am I going to fart? Am I going to clean? But it's that feeling of something's going to happen that I'm going to have absolutely no control over.
I wondered if you had any more perspectives on the sort of like mentality, like as a mental health professional, how much you feel psychology is coming into this, or is it more a physical thing, like a pelvic, like the strength of a pelvic floor or the specific shape of someone's body?
Yeah. I think psychology comes into play in so many things. With this, I'm not in the way that you think. Everyone's like, oh, you just have to relax and it'll happen. And like, if you relax, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And now someone's just like putting pressure on you to relax, which kind of defeats the purpose. Wow. But at the same time, you can hold yourself back from things. And it doesn't mean you have to relax, but it's worth digging into why you're holding yourself back. So when I do squirt coaching, a lot of times it's really going into those psychological things. I was working with someone recently and I had my hands inside of her so we could feel the squeeze and release. And I was like, I know you're stronger than that, like push. And like, we could tell that she was holding back from like pushing and flowering out on my fingers, because she, like one time when she orgasmed and squirted, there was like a little bit of poop and she's so scared of letting that go again because she doesn't want that to happen. So it's more of like holding yourself back than relaxing, of being scared of not allowing your body to do what it's capable or wants to doing. I always tell people, trust your body, push it past what you think it's capable of, because it's going to surprise you.
Can you share some of your sort of more technical strategies, especially perhaps for people wanting to do it to themselves?
It's easier if you've squirted once before, any kind of which way, with a toy, with a partner, because that way you have a frame of reference and you know the feeling and sensation you're trying to replicate. Once you're doing that, it's really a matter of figuring out different ways that you're touching yourself and squeezing your pelvic floor muscles, which will also increase your pleasure. In doing that, you're activating your G area, which activating like the G area, which, you know, we call it the G spot, but it's really more of an area. When you do that, you don't need to be on it the whole time. Once you've activated it, it's not like, you know, it's not a button you push. It's going to stay engorged in that sense. So you can activate it in different ways by squeezing your pelvic floor. And by doing that, it's going to increase the pleasure of however else that you're touching yourself. And then through that, it's really a series of like squeezing, pushing, flowering out, not pushing like you're peeing, pushing like you're pushing something out of your vaginal canal. There's so many different ways to squirt. And when I teach people, it's more like, here's a couple different things you can try, but don't think that you have to have direct G-spot stimulation. One, which not everyone likes direct G-spot stimulation. You can stimulate your G-spot anally. You can stimulate it internally using your muscles. It doesn't have to be with a finger, which fingers can be very rough. And I think because we've heralded this G-spot stimulation, whether it's with a toy or a person, people are going way too fucking rough. And you know, they're gentle, delicate things down there.
In my personal experience, whenever I have had like the two fingers and the come-hither movement, those have been like the least pleasurable squirting experiences I've had. Like it's like this like super like focus, you know, like the guy like trying to increase like boost their sexual ego, etc.
Vagina just clenches at some point, and it's like nope, not gonna happen now.
There's not one way to do anything, especially when it comes to sex. There's not one way to do anything at all. Our bodies are so different. Our body combinations are different. Like with anything that I teach, like, yeah, there's like a couple tried and true ways, just like, you know, with certain people, like maybe a lot of people like to be touched a certain way, but then you're going to find someone who doesn't, or whose body is different type of a thing. So whenever I teach things, it's always, here's tools for your toolbox. You might like one, you might like seven, you might like none, but there's starting points and then you can move from there. But there is absolutely no one size fits all when it comes to sex.
Do you think that it's possible for every vulva owner to squirt?
There's not enough research out there to know, but I do think that everyone is capable of doing it if they have a strong enough pelvic floor and relationship with their vulva. It's a lot about that understanding. And, you know, as the years go on and I'm able to work with more people, my approach with squirting and teaching people is Rome wasn't built in a day. I didn't learn how to squirt 1,250 milliliters, and that took a period of time. But Rome wasn't built in a day. So when people come to my squirting classes, some people squirt that day, some people squirt that night or that week or a year later or months later type of a thing. But I have had a lot of success stories and people coming back. Everyone has their own journey, their own timeline. And part of the fun is just exploring and figuring out your body instead of saying that, you get a gold medal, you can do something.
Is there anything you would like to add aside from squirting that's just like maybe telling us a bit about what you're up to? Is there anything that you want to share?
Yeah. So generally you can find it all on my website, which is lolajean.com. I do have a masturbation audio class. That's like a guided meditation masturbation. That one is for individuals who identify as female or have vulvas. That one's more of a standard masturbation. I'm working on potentially adding a squirting version within that as well. And also I travel and teaching, and easiest way to figure all that out is go to my website and just disseminate from there.
We've all been doing our research on squirting, I'm sure, in every way possible. I've actually been watching a bit of Pornhub, as you do, and found some Kenneth Play videos on there. Have you heard of him?
Oh my God, I'm so in love with him. I want to marry.
We're very big fans. We love him.
So he has videos on Pornhub, which are actually instructional videos for squirting. People are going on there and watching them and saying, oh, I came here to masturbate, but I actually left having learned something.
I was so keen on having the whole thing. I actually even paid. Pay for your porn, pay for your sex education. I pay for the whole course, which is 23 videos on it. I mean, I'm not even through yet. And I think it's an amazing resource, even for teenagers and like young people. I wish I would have seen that in school. Like he's so articulate. He's so everything, the way he puts it, the way it's so great that it's very explicit. That's why it's on Pornhub and not on YouTube.
Yeah, he's got lots of helpful tips on squirting, so definitely check that out. Also, Lola Jean runs squirting workshops if you are based in America. And it seems to be that more sex workshops are popping up everywhere, like Lindsay's squirting workshop, for example, which you can just watch from the comfort of your own home by going on ersties.com/podcast. One thing that I did learn from watching all of these instructional videos is how helpful toys can be. Actually, I've learned that from other experiences. My current theory on this, glass dildos or heavy dildos are super helpful because they allow you to just they have that weight. It's physics, So you can get a bit more leverage, and especially if they've got a more weighted shape at one end, that really helps, especially that Enjoy stainless steel toy, which is sort of a curved toy with a ball at the end. Just makes it so much easier.
I think it's also important that squirting, at least in my experience, it happens when you have achieved certain level of arousal. You need to warm up and so, because also orgasms. And if you can orgasm multiple times and so on, orgasms build up into increasing your bloodstream. Of course, everything inside of you, your vagina and everything gets a little bit tighter, because you're pumping blood and stuff boom, 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 boom. So it also puts pressure into your prostate.
I agree. And that is something that actually, I caught myself when I started watching these squirting workshops. I was just, the whole beginning, it's about warming up and clitorisy and so on. And I caught myself skipping them. I was so focused on getting there and having that I forgot, no, it's about the journey. And actually only the journey will bring you there.
I feel like it's quite empowering to your pleasure to sort of be able to see it represented through this liquid.
They call it Amrita in those old school tantric workshops. They call the liquid Amrita, and they think it's the nectar of the goddess. And they put it in their skin, and some people drink it and stuff. Yeah, and I was I'm so sick of reading semen is good for my skin. Those things. I'm sick of it. I'm what about my vagina fluid? When is it good for my skin? And I was really happy when I read that.
And it's also really interesting because even the word semen, back in the days, Kama Sutra days and Rita days and so on, it wasn't a gendered word. Nowadays, semen has this very gendered connotation, pertaining to people with penises only. But way before semen, it was for whatever your genitals or your gender identity.
There are some people out there suggesting that female ejaculate has antibacterial properties and could help to prevent you from getting UTIs. The idea then being that it has an evolutionary benefit because you're more likely to be able to have sex, or especially rampant sex or whatever, if you don't have a UTI sort of stopping you from being able to do that. Also, emotionally, I know Kenneth Play was saying that lots of people that go to his squirting workshops actually cry either during or after it happening. Has anyone found that?
But I guess it's also like the side of like empowerment. Like it's about like getting to know your body better and getting to like have access to that. When you can see like all like this like a machine and all like these traditions that were like preventing you from knowing what happens inside your body, how your pleasure works, etc.
Absolutely, I agree. I've had kind of a similar experience after sports, actually. So just maybe, just being so in touch with your body and in your body in a moment, and then experiencing like a very intense physical experience that also, translates into an emotional outburst, but like a catharsis kind of.
Kenneth Play, he says like if someone's touching you and it feels like you want to pee and you keep stopping it for maybe like X amount of years of your life, and then finally this guy comes in, he's like, you can do it, like helps you and enables that, and you come, it'll be like Shawshank Redemption when like you come out of the sewer and it's raining, you're like, I'm free. Like I could imagine that after years of telling your body not to do something and then finally being able to do it, I would definitely cry. I've never had the feeling of needing to pee during sex, but I could imagine it being so like inhibiting.
But it's really funny because when you when it's like pee, like liquid from your bladder, even if you're like fucking really hard, even if you push, it doesn't come out.
There's lots of reasons that could be stopping us from squirting. Maybe we're scared that it's pee or some other thing. There's some kind of psychological issue that we have with it. Maybe we don't understand our physiology enough. But thankfully, there's so many resources out there to help us do it, whether it's watching Lindsay's squirting workshop on Ersties, whether it's watching Kenneth Play's wonderful demonstrations, or listening to Lola Jean. We can all learn to squirt, and we should all have the opportunity to do so.
Amen.
I squirt to that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ersties podcast. If you want to continue the conversation about squirting, don't forget to head over to our social media channels on Twitter @Ersties Podcast and Instagram Ersties_podcast. You can also visit our website ersties-podcast.com. And if you want to fill in the squirting survey from Dr. Jana and Kenneth Play, it's open to everybody, squirters, non-squirters, all genders. Visit squirtingsurvey.com. We've got more exciting episodes coming up, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Bye.
The Ersties Podcast.